Hi, it's Janine Coswara here, and I just want to show you a layout that I've used some masking using gesso and a credit card on. Now, I'm using the brand new Tea Thyme range from Prima, and it's just one of the summer release products or ranges that they're putting out, and it's absolutely stunning vintage florals on it. So what I'm doing here is just using the Comfort Craft knife to go around and chop out some of these individual images that I'm going to set aside later and use on my layout. As you can see, they come out and they just give you beautiful floral embellishments for your page, and I think they're rather pretty. Now, I've just taken this brand new mask, and it's a gorgeous damask style, and I've lined it up with the top of the page, and now using my credit card and adding gesso onto it, and then I'm just going to swipe it across the top. And what I want to do is just keep swiping across the very top and pulling that gesso around so it fills those gaps in the design. And it just means with the gesso and doing it that way other than the brush, I'll end up with a slightly raised up image of gesso on the page. And for the next bit, just carefully line it back up, and I've just held that top bit off the page slightly and continue to gesso the whole edge, and you can see it's pretty much a seamless design that way of this gorgeous filigree style damask on the page. Now I'm just going to line up some Spellbinders dies. They're one of the really large dies that they do, and I just line them up on the page to get an idea of how much I need to cut off, and then I'm just going to run it through my big shot. And this is just going to create a mat for my photo, but just quite a decorative mat. And I'm lining it up, and I'm going to do around 3 layers on this design. So then I'm going to bring in some of the grey, and that gives a nice contrast to the green layer. And then finally I'll do this gorgeous little spotty pink floral layer as well. And I'm just checking how I'm going to design it and what I'm going to do. And I've got this bit of flower that I cut out earlier, and I just decided, well, I'll probably cut that in half and use half on the top and half on the bottom for this design, and use some of those other bits that I cut out earlier on the edges. Now I'm just taking some of this pink text, and I'm just going to use that in those little inverse sort of flag cuts or inverse V cuts on the side of the page, just a little bit more interest to add another layer, and ink it up using the Ranger Walnut Stain Distress Ink, which is, you know, my absolute all-time favourite distress ink. And then also just using the distress tool to distress up those edges. It's such a gorgeous vintage range that, you know, really getting in and distressing those edges adds so much to it and really suits that real shabby chic feel that I'm going to get in this layout by doing so. Now, when I'm using the tool on this artisan edge, I use the rasp part for most of it, but you can actually get right into the very corners by using the blade part of the distress tool on the side. So I can get in and just do those the deep parts of the artisan edge and just shabby them up a little bit too. You can see by using that side part. So all aspects of this rasp tool can be put to use, and they all have different purposes and stuff, and I do find that quite often I like to use both the coarse and the fine edge of the rasp, and as well as that side little bit, just depending on what I'm trying to do. Now I'm just going to glue all those layers together using a bit of Helmar 450, and I like the Helmar 450 because it doesn't warp the pages at all, and it dries quickly, and it's really strong holding and flexible when it dries as well, so it just means that it's not going to have bits falling off and that. And I also use the distress tool just to slightly shabby up the edges of my hand-cut flowers as well, where I've done the fussy cutting around them. And it just means that if there are any little nicks or notches that you're not entirely happy about, you can sort of smooth the edges slightly with rasping them up a bit. And it means also that with that little additional texture, you can use your fingernails and just lift on the very corners and bring that up to bring it off the page and give it a bit more detail in the whole design. So I've gone around all those little bits and pieces of the hand-cut flowers and worked out which ones I want under and which ones I want over in the design, and finished them off that way. Now I've actually taken some of the clear text packaging from previous release, and I've run it through my Sizzix machine using 2 circles, one on top of the other, and that gives me a inverse sort of, so not an inverse, but a cutout bit. Now, it didn't go right the way through, so I had to use my scissors to cut around it and my craft knife to get on the inside a bit, but it gave a nice deep partial cut in it that gave me a good guide. And now I'm just going through and sort of working out how I want the rest of this designed, how I want the flowers arranged, and some of these gorgeous brand new resins. I mean, that little resin cherub is stunning, and it just sits up on the corner of the page, and I've just added a little bit of paper underneath to give it a seat basically to sit on, and then working out what my floral placement would be around that. And these new flowers are just so beautiful. I have actually just popped in an older cherry blossom branch there because I really love the grey, working with that on this page. Rather than ordinarily I'd go for quite a pink and add in the pink, but I've just decided to keep it to the grey and the white this time, or the creamy white, just as something a little bit different, keeping it a little bit more subtle, and allowing the hand-cut floral elements to bring that little bit of extra colour into the page rather than the flowers dominating the colour. Now, with the little white roses, you can actually, once you get hold of them, you can just pull them apart slightly with your fingers, and that's a really great way of adding a bit more size to them because they widen up that little bit. Now, another little trick I've used on this is when I'm sticking down some of the elements on my page, I've gone in and I've used the grid as a mat and been able to line it up with that. Now, on this, I'm actually going to do some hand sewing, so I'm just selecting out the colour of my thread, just using some DMC thread. Now, when I'm doing hand sewing, I always pre-punch all my holes, and I like to go about 1/2 centimetre at a time, and then go in and just use back stitch to hand sew around the edge. And I actually hand sewed it all because I ran out of battery while I was filming, and I kind of figured that would take a while, so I kind of did that when no one was watching me. And just adding these elements on now. The new swirls in the new release, they've done some gorgeous small swirls because Prima realised that so often we were taking our large swirls and cutting them into pieces, and these are perfect smaller swirls that just are just the right size for popping in off your floral clusters, to add that little bit of swirl coming in and around it. And you can see I've added that to that top cluster just in the underneath layers before adding in my shabby chic resin cherub and then my floral elements down there. Now I'm using the packaging down the bottom as an open sort of circle, and I'm sitting another resin off the edge of that, and because that's going to be sitting up a bit higher because that photo mat was foam mounted up, I also put foam mount under all the areas of that resin that weren't sitting directly on a flat part of the page, because it's really important you put a lot of the foam mount tape under that when you're doing it so they don't break or crack if the layout gets bent and that, because they've got that support under them with all that foam mount tape. And I did the same with the head of the cherub at the top because that was sitting off the flat part of the photo mat, and I put a nice big thick piece of foam mount tape under that just so it's completely supported at the same level to help prevent against any breakage of those resins because of unevenness. And it just means that you can layer them up in those more layered designs. And again, just fussing around with my floral cluster and then adding a title. Now, I find I add extra adhesive to the back, even though they're self-adhesive letters. I do like to add a little bit, and on this I'm using a glue gloss that has like a lip gloss applicator end to it, which is really easy for sticking down your lettering, especially these small letters, and just adds a little bit more hold to them when you're doing it. Now, I actually printed off the word angels onto clear transparency off my printer, and I've just used the Helmar 450 to stick that down, and that creates another font as part of my title with that. And you can see from these shots gives a beautiful image.